This is Blackstone Joe, and you're listening to Slick Talk.
If I say I'm an oil man, you will agree.
There's the stink of oil about him.
Hello and welcome to episode 133 of Slick Talk. I'm your host, Blackstone Joe, and I'm glad you're here. Today's episode is titled, They Said, We Said. I'll start with the report, which pertained to an oil sample from a 2016 Prius. Powered by Toyota's 2ZR FXE, this Prius had two samples in the file and both looked pretty good. The first sample had unknown mileage, but metals stacked up pretty well in comparison to our averages for the engine type. Didn't see any contamination in there, and the oil was holding up well. Fast forward to the second sample, it had 16,498 miles on it, and the owner was looking to go even longer between oil changes. And for the most part, a longer run seemed doable. The oil was holding up well. We can see that in the viscosity being normal, the TBN showing some active additive left. Even oil filtration was excellent with hardly any solid material, i.e. insolubles, present. But there was one reason I held back from suggesting a longer run, and that was the aluminum content. That's from piston and bearing wear. With aluminum being slightly high, I suggested another oil run close to 16,000 miles, and we'd take it from there. Basically, I want to see a stable trend emerge, or hopefully a bit of improvement. Anything's possible at this point in the trends, which are only in the early stages of development, but this is still a very good report. After all, you have an oil change interval that is quite a bit longer than average. It's longer than Toyota's recommendation for this engine type, and in most respects, the engine is handling it well. Fast forward about a year, and I'm sitting at my desk working on, you guessed it, another oil report, and I get a phone call from the very same customer who sent this sample along. They called and explained that after reading their report, they had a question. The oil says I can go 20,000 miles. Y'all said stay at 16,000. And your report seems to indicate the oil was holding up well. So what gives? Between the vehicle manufacturer, oil company, and your friendly neighborhood oil analysis lab, there sure are a lot of folks telling you what to do. So I certainly don't blame the customer for having some confusion or wanting to break down the results a bit more to help understand why we didn't suggest a longer run despite the oil they're running. Well, in this case, it's not as if the oil or car manufacturer, it's not like either of them had it wrong, so to speak, in their oil change interval recommendations, despite what we called for. Because even if the oil is good for 20,000, that doesn't necessarily mean the engine is. And what an oil analysis does is it tells you all sides of the story, both how the oil is holding up and how the engine is doing. And it's combining these ingredients that will help produce the ideal recipe or maintenance plan for your engine. Had we only looked at the physical properties, a longer run would seem feasible. The TBN shows some active additive left, and the viscosity was good. The physical properties alone don't tell you how the engine is keeping up from a wear standpoint, however. So just because the oil could have been run longer, that doesn't necessarily mean the engine was up for it. And in this case, the aluminum content was enough to give me pause. See, high metals can indicate an engine is working too hard or reaching its limit for extended oil use, and that's why it's not to say the oil company was wrong. It's just that the oil you run isn't the only part of the equation. Not to mention, increasing metals can also speak to a mechanical problem developing, the likes of which no oil on Earth will prevent or stop from advancing. And when you have an increase in one metal from one sample to another, it's possible that's what's going on. Here, we aren't too suspicious of a problem with aluminum, just a hair outside the average range. But when you're in those early stages of building trends, you want to respond to how these numbers shift until you can see a discernible pattern emerge. But again, when you look at the oil, when you look at how the engine responded to this interval, it's still a very good report overall. Aluminum is the only metal outside the average range. The physical properties show the oil was holding up well and it wasn't subject to harmful contamination. So, by most accounts, it's a good report for a good engine. And in this case, knowing the oil was holding up well is still great news for the customer. This engine, again, is in the early stages of building trends. So it stands to reason that if aluminum holds or drops, which is also possible, it could prove normal, especially if the engine is running well with a consistent wear profile to go along with it. That means the engine hasn't necessarily reached its ceiling for extended oil use based on this report. We'll look for aluminum at the next oil change as well as the other metals, and we can rest on trends in determining what the next oil change interval should be after we can see how aluminum and the other metals respond with another 16,000 miles on the odometer. For now, the customer knows a couple of things for sure. One, the oil did hold up well, and a 20,000 mile interval may indeed prove doable for the engine moving forward because at this point, wear looks great overall. There's just one area we want to keep an eye on for them, and that's why an engine's story isn't written by just one result. We'll rely on trends, and so far, emerging trends look very good. If you find yourself wondering if your engine or the oil you're running is capable of any particular interval, oil analysis is a great way to find that out. That brings today's show to a close. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you in 2025. This is Blackstone Joe, signing off.
The Slick Talk podcast is powered by Blackstone Laboratories. If you're ready to start your oil analysis journey, visit blackstone-labs.com to order your free test kit.